Do you really have ADHD, or are you just a people pleaser? This is a very important question to ask curiously when an adult comes to complain of feeling tired of being taken advantage of for so long, feeling tired of being taken for granted, of not being able to say no. And they might say this directly or indirectly. But the reason they've come today is because they're finding it too difficult to manage. They've been people pleasers for a long time, but lately it's become too difficult to handle, too overwhelming to bear. And so they're coming because they're going through a crisis. And this crisis has been progressively getting worse, and it's been affecting their executive function. And executive function is a symptom that we commonly find in ADHD. So they're finding it difficult to pay attention, they're finding it difficult to remember stuff, they're finding it difficult to plan their day, to prioritize important things, they're finding it difficult to organize their life, they're finding it difficult to commit to completing tasks, so they're procrastinating a lot. And more importantly, they're finding it extremely difficult to control their impulses, to regulate their impulsivity, which is a very prominent symptom that we find in ADHD. ADHD is characterized strongly by three traits: hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention. And we can also find the same in people pleasers, especially this particular patient that we're talking about in this scenario, who, because they're saying they're feeling tired, they're also feeling quite irritable, which can make them a bit interactive or restless. And now, even though they have the impulse to say yes, they do it with a lot of anger, with a lot of resentment, with a lot of guilt, with a lot of protest that may not be outwardly expressed. And so within themselves, they're experiencing a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety, a lot of irritability. So they're not comfortable. That's why they've come. They're experiencing a crisis. They're no longer able to fall asleep as they used to. So they spend maybe 2 hours in bed before they can actually fall asleep. And they're not able to connect that their people-pleasing behavior is taking a toll on them, on their mental health. But they see the toll only as ADHD. So they might come to get a diagnosis of ADHD because when we talk about executive dysfunction, when we talk about symptoms of not being able to, procrastinating, poor timekeeping, not being able to remember things easily, not being able to pay attention, we tend to strongly associate him with ADHD only. But executive dysfunction is a symptom that can occur in many mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. We can have a symptom of executive dysfunction to different degrees in different ways. So it's not only found in ADHD. Now, it would be very important to understand the onset of these symptoms and the progression, and if anyone else is noticing these symptoms of ADHD. And so what you're likely to find for people with people-pleasing behavior is that their impulsivity is confined to responses they give to other people, such that if I'm sitting down to do a task that I have initiated myself, and then you ask me to do something for you, I know I should be working on my own task, but because I have this impulse to please you, to get that instant validation from you, that instant approval in your reaction to me saying yes, I'm likely to say yes. I'm likely to be overtaken by this urge to say yes to your request. And so I'm able to complete other people's tasks, but I'm not able to complete my own self-initiated tasks. That becomes a very strong indicator to differentiate or to distinguish impulsivity in ADHD and impulsivity in people-pleasing behavior. People with people-pleasing behaviors tend to be impulsive on other people's request and not their own. So on their own, we're likely to see the other symptoms of executive dysfunction: lack of planning, lack of prioritization, procrastination. But to other people, they're not seeing that. They're actually seeing someone who's very helpful, someone who's very willing to do things for others, someone who has a good heart, someone who would sacrifice their own stuff for other people. So people would speak very well of people pleasers, but for them, within themselves, they're experiencing a lot of chaos. There are a lot of crisis going on. There's a lot of conflict going on. And we're likely to see this happening in people in their 30s, 40s. So they're coming to a time in their life where they're starting to take stock of what they've done, what they've achieved, compared to their peers, and they're realizing that they're falling short. So they're becoming aware that they're doing more for others and less for themselves. And that is one of the factors that pushes them to a crisis, that pushes them to want to now say no to other people. And they're feeling pressed for time. So before they come to me, they've actually tried so many things on their own. They've read stuff, they've listened to stuff, they've even rehearsed on their own. They've played out a scenario in their mind that someone is going to ask them something and they're going to say no. So in their mind, they've been trying to become the person they want to become. But then when the real situation happens, the urge takes over. This impulsive behavior takes over and they say yes. And usually people-pleasing behavior is a trauma response, meaning this person grew up in an environment where they try to express parts of themselves authentically, but the people around them rejected those parts. The people around them were upset by those parts. They felt uncomfortable with those parts of them, whether it was singing or playing or talking or topics of conversations. And so because they saw the negative response in other people, they wanted to get a positive response. So they started doing what the other person wanted. So if it's a child, they started becoming what the parent wanted them to be: quiet. If it was perhaps at school, they became what the teacher wanted them to be. And so they found themselves emulating this sort of behavior in different aspects of their lives. They became what people wanted and they were happy with that. And so that became their source of pleasure. And so now it's formed part of their script, part of their what we call schema, such that as they grow up, they continue using the same schema to fit into that situation. If I want to be liked, if I want to fit in, I just have to be what the other person wants me to be. So their source of approval, their source of validation, their source of self-esteem, their source of satisfaction comes from pleasing other people. That's what drives them. And so it's very important to distinguish then people-pleasing behavior as a trauma response from ADHD with neurobiological basis of pathology, because the approach to treatment is different.